welcome to Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle, and this is a show where we talk all things parenting. Well, this summer, we are experiencing some of the hottest weather on record. Some states were just in stretches of heat over 100 degrees. Now, typically, August sees some of the hottest weather all year. And every year around this time, we start to see fall sports start their practices outside to prepare for the season. Maybe where you live, you've already seen football players practicing with helmets on. And whether it's football, soccer, or cross country, practicing outdoors can be worrisome for parents and coaches who have kids out in the extreme temperatures.
Scorching.
When temperatures are hot, they feel even hotter on the football field, soccer field, or any other surface meant for exercising. And playing safe can be difficult.
A lot of our conversations have to do with it being hot and wanting water, but we try to keep each other accountable, but sometimes it's not always that easy.
Even the National Playground Safety Organization says synthetic surfaces can retain heat, making it hotter than the air temperature.
I kept looking at him. I said, "You're so sweaty," and just giving him more bottles of water.
The EPA estimates that there are more than 1,300 heat-related deaths in the United States per year. Hot cars are the most dangerous environment for kids, and they should never be left in a vehicle for any extended period of time. But if you're outside, make sure you are taking every precaution.
Keep it early, take the water, take the sunscreen, and the hats.
And here I thought I was taking all the precautions, but even after I did the interview with our doctor that you'll meet in a few minutes, my daughter got a little heat exhaustion. We weren't watching our water intake. We were outside for only about an hour, but that's all it took. She complained of a headache and nausea. We had to quickly hydrate and stay inside for pretty much an entire day. Pediatric sports medicine doctor Richard So with the Cleveland Clinic talked to me about how to make sure that your child is safe, whether they're playing in the yard or taking part in sports. So this is the time of year that we are seeing a lot more kids getting into practices even before school starts. What are the dangers, especially as we're seeing these extreme high heat temperatures across the country?
Yeah. Football season, fall sports, school is just 3 weeks away, and the kids are starting to get back on the fields. But this is that time of the year, especially when we get to in August with high heat and high humidity, where we can see some heat-related illness.
And what are some signs of those heat-related illnesses? Like what would parents be looking for when their kids come home?
So there's a lot of different variations or different levels of heat illness. For example, just one of them is heat exhaustion. When you go out running in a 90-degree day, you may feel dizzy. You may have a headache. You may have that tunnel vision when you're running. That means you probably need to cool down a little bit, at least get some shade and get something to drink. So that's just one. Another level is we have something called heat cramps. There's heat exhaustion, and the most severe is when you can get heat stroke.
And what are signs of heat stroke?
So if you've been out in hot degree, high humidity, remember, it all comes down to a balance of thermoregulation of your body, of how your body creates heat. That's probably where most of the heat comes, is from internally. But also, everyone's always worried about the sun beating down on your skin and externally. But if the temperature outside or the environmental temperature is greater than the heat produced your body, then the way your body dissipates or gets rid of the heat, that can lead to these dangerous parts where we call it heat stroke. The number one thing that you're looking around for heat stroke, yes, you will go through the parts where you're super tired, fatigued, dizzy, headache. You'll have the exhaustion can be the first sign. But the number one thing that you're always worried about with heat stroke is these kids are confused. You get a little confusion, and then number one thing you want to do is you want to take their temperature. And actually a core temperature, you get 104, that kid needs to be cooled down like with an ice bath, maybe a hose, as quick as you can, and make sure that your school has an emergency action plan to cool that child down.
And I think most coaches, teachers, parents are somewhat smart about, okay, we know it's a hot day, kids are outside, they're exercising, but we'll take breaks, we'll take water breaks. But do these symptoms and illnesses still sneak up on people? Like, how sneaky is it to, think, oh, I'm safe for an hour or an hour or two, and then all of a sudden something bad happens?
Oh, absolutely. Especially if you get down south, Alabama, Texas, those places where you get really high sun, high humidity, it can sneak up on a kid really easy. The nice thing about it is you get to the upper levels of high schools and colleges, there's certified athletic trainers who are very well versed of taking the temperature, checking the humidity of when it's safe to go out there so it doesn't sneak up on them. But the problem is the kids. You know, football's a tough sport. You know, soccer, you just want to last out there. You may have a runner's twitch and you want to make the cross country team. Maybe you're the cuspy kid. You know, but some things that parents can do at home is, number one, is make sure that your kid is hydrated before even you get to practice. You know, that's going to be the number one thing, because dehydrated kids, they have a hard time sweating, and sweating is one way that we get rid of the heat inside our body.
Let's talk about some of those drinks that kids can have. You know, like for me, I mean, my kids are somewhat little, and I'm imagining even teens, it's hard to remind them, like, are they drinking 8 cups of water a day? Are there other drinks that they should be consuming to make sure that their hydration levels stay up?
Good. I think before we get into like what kind of drinks, I think more importantly, it's knowing when to drink or when to start. For example, when I tell my patients, whenever football doubles start, that's where you have practice in the morning, you eat lunch at the school, and then you have a double. You have a practice in the afternoon. One of the most important things is you start your hydration process the night before. So, for example, if this is your body's hydration tank, our body's 60% water. If you don't drink the night before, you start with half a tank in the morning, and as the sun goes and you start sweating, you get down to here, you start to make mental errors. Next thing you know, you make mental errors. That's a big problem. Yeah. So I tell my athletes, we drink a bottle of water before we go to bed. And actually, before we go to practice, we top ourselves off. So we start the day with a full tank. Okay, great. That's what you want to do, is that the hydration process is preventative, and it starts before you even get to practice. Then while you're at practice, the number one thing that's always best is water. Water is the number one fluid for hydration. If you get into doubles, where you're practicing more than 2 to 3 hours, or you have a big tournament, then probably you can get into some of the sports drinks where you do have fluid electrolyte replacement drinks. And there's numerous ones out there.
And so how important are electrolytes? Like, are we losing electrolytes when we're exercising and sweating? Do we need to replace those, or is that a myth?
No, you are losing electrolytes in your sweat. Anyone who's licked their sweat, you can taste a little bit of salt in your sweat. So if you've been practicing or playing for more than 2 hours, you can use electrolytes to replace the salts lost, because one of the heat-related illnesses is you can get heat cramps. So sometimes what we tell the people who are having doubles, where if you're just drinking water all day, and a lot of the colleges and high schools are doing a great job with the water fountains and the different types of fluid replacement stations that they have. But I'll tell my athletes who are more predisposed to cramping. You've seen the football player where they have to lie down and they have to bend the top of the foot to get the cramps stretched out. A lot of those kids, I'll have them have like actually a little bit of saltier lunch. So sometimes cold cuts, a bag of chips, that would be okay with their water during their drink. Okay. There was a big trend within the past couple of years, the big water gallon jug, like the big jug that everybody was carrying around. Is that something for kids too, or is that too much? It can be too much. There's a balance where you don't want to get waterlogged. A lot of things that we tell some athletes to check is how yellow is your urine when you go to the bathroom. If it is like bright yellow, like a highlighter, or even get a duskier dark, you're probably behind on your fluids. If it's coming out like light yellow or a little bit clear, you're going to be okay. That's a good way to check for their kids themselves, because remember, they should be urinating too, because part of the dehydration process is if you get too dehydrated, it can't injure your kidneys. But one of the things that you want to do is that, there has to be a balance. Too much of something is never good. Yeah. Let's talk about the sun exposure. Does that lead to
when you're bare shouldered, you're, maybe, depending on what sport it is, you're in a tank top or less outside, the sun's beating down. Does that make any of this worse when it comes to getting heat stroke or becoming dehydrated?
There actually is. There's tables out there where it's not just the temperature outside, but you have to take that in combination with the relative humidity. So if you have high humidity, and high temperature, those are some of the more, like, what we call red zones, where you might want to wait till practices. Like we've always taught our kids the highest sun is from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So that's why some of the practices are early in the morning. You eat lunch during those hours where you have high heat and humidity, and then practice in the afternoon. It's very similar where it's more comfortable to run on a windy day, where the breeze is helping cooling you off, versus a hot and humid day where you're breathing in the hot air. And remember, these athletes, they have on their helmets, they have on their pads, they have on their jerseys. That contributes to keeping in some of their heat, but when they're taking off their helmets, they're actually sweating and dissipating more heat.
Yeah. And I want to include too, because the little kids who maybe not in sports yet, but they're outside, maybe in these extreme temperatures, maybe they're just coloring with chalk, or they're, running through the sprinkler or whatever. Are there precautions that kids just playing outside need to be taking when it comes to sun exposure, and making sure that they are not making mistakes of, you don't think of it as exercising, but we are outside, we're active for a couple hours during the day.
I think kids should be playing outside all day long, especially in Cleveland with our brutal winters, but playing outside, number one, you're worried about the heat, but you're also worried about the sun. I'm a big believer in sunscreen. Every time you get sunburned, it increases your chance to get skin cancers. So, and it's more about reapplying rather than how strong it is. So just keep on reapplying every couple hours, especially if you're going swimming, you are playing in those sprinklers. But having frequent drink breaks, I think the ones that they have at the pool where they blow the whistle, and I think those are the opportune times to make sure that your kid is drinking.
Yeah. And then there's the sun protectant clothing that is highly recommended. But my question as a parent too, because I see these rash guards with long sleeves, or the sun protectant clothing is usually has long sleeves, and in this heat and humidity, I'm thinking, well, I don't know if I want my kids in almost like a layer while they're outside, but is that safe? Is that more protective?
Yeah, coming from somewhere where it's cold, where in the winter we are taught that we are supposed to add layers to keep ourselves warm. But the nice thing about in the summer, when you have rash guards, or a lot of you'll see football players wearing long sleeves, there is a twofold part on that one. Number one is that it does protect you from the sun. But what you need to know is that these are moisture wicking fabrics that actually help you sweat more, or actually, let me change that, it helps pull the sweat away from your skin and can help you cool down a little bit more. So it's not keeping you warm, it's actually protecting you from the sun. And when you get these high-tech moisture wicking fabrics, they're not going to harm your child.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I should have even included this in the first part of this interview when we were talking about the signs and the symptoms of heat stroke, dehydration. At what point do you go to maybe a doctor, an emergency room, a clinic, because you're thinking that your child may have some serious symptoms? What are those symptoms that we need to go get maybe some emergency care?
Well, when we talk about heat stroke, which is the most extreme of when we talk about heat illnesses, a lot of times a lot can be done before you get there, because if you get there, while the child is sick, you might lose some timing. So what the high schools and the colleges have, especially down south, they actually have like a cooling tub where it's filled with cold water and ice, or there's a rapid cooling station where we have at least a hose. Because the signs that you're looking for, number one, if you get your kid's a little crampy, that's usually an older kid who might be playing soccer or football. But you can see just heat, exhaustion, headache, just not acting right, looking really tired and fatigued, and an 8-year-old who shouldn't be, you probably need to cool that kid down, and just get some cold fluids into that kid. Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about heat stroke, we get a core temperature greater than 104 degrees. That's an emergency where we get major cell breakdown and your body is getting hurt from a lot of the inflammatory markers that are going through the body. That child or that athlete probably needs to be cooled down rapidly, and usually they don't make it to the emergency room on these points. But if you're at that point where your kid is confused, and one of the things that I think that gets overlooked, but it's been reported, is that if your child is in the heat and they start vomiting, mm-hmm. You're not going to let that kid play anymore. That kid needs to be put in, you need to cool that kid down really, really, really fast. Sometimes you're putting ice packs by the large arteries in the armpits or in the groins. You're hosing the kid down to help cool that core body temperature as fast as possible, so you don't need the emergency room or 911.
Yeah, that's great to know. All right, Dr.
But it's vomiting and confusion. Those are going to be the hardest ones where that kid's sick.
That's good to know, because that's you never want to get to that point, but that is the point where I'd be calling, the hotline, the doctor, or jumping in the car and getting them straight to the emergency room. Dr. So, thank you so much. This was very insightful, and I think we all need to take these tips, even as adults, as we're outside trying to enjoy this weather. These are great reminders. If your child is in sports, or even if you are someone who likes to be active outside, make sure you have that water bottle filled and ready to go. And can you believe it's August already? Here on Mom Squad, we have several weeks of back to school content planned for you. Everything from saving money on school supplies to determining if club sports is worth the money. That is a conversation my friends and I are always in. So make sure you join our squad. You can find us on the Mom Squad with Maureen Kyle Facebook page. That's where you can find information about upcoming episodes and also interact with other parents. We also want to hear from you. Tell us what questions you have, then we'll take them to the experts. Thanks again for joining me here on Mom Squad. We'll see you right back here next week.